Welcome back, troglodytes, to the Trogly's Bass Guitar Show. This is a 1967 Gibson Electric Bass 3. If you missed the unboxing video of this one, this is a consignment piece. A fellow troglodyte sent this one in for me to review, so this is available for sale if you're interested in it. But let's dive into a little bit of the history of the electric Gibson bass. In 1953, Gibson introduced their very first electric bass, called the EB-1. It essentially looked like a stand-up double bass. A lot of people like to call it the violin shape. It even had the sweet end pin that you could pull out and play it like an upright bass. They also had the painted-on F-holes. That version lasted all alone for about 5 years until the EB-2 came out. That one is basically in the shape of a 335. I think those things are really fascinating as well. But the one we're talking about here was introduced in 1959, the EB-0. When this model was first introduced, it had the shape of like a Les Paul Double Cut Jr. And it had that until 1961, until this version came out. The EB-0s just had a single neck pickup, so imagine this guitar, but without this other pickup right here, and you don't have all these extra knobs and a pickup selector switch. They put this big, massive, beefy humbucker as close to the neck as possible to give these all the low-end sounds. But the EB-3 is just the EB-0 with the added stuff that we were just talking about. So it has a humbucker in the neck and a mini humbucker in the bridge. When I throw this one on the workbench, we'll take a closer look at these and learn like some of their nicknames and whatnot. You have a rotary pickup selector switch. It kind of looks like a baritone. I'm probably going to call it a baritone many times. This takes you through tones like the neck pickup with a mid-range notch, just the bridge and neck with the low end rolled off of the neck pickup, and then just the neck pickup with a choke on it. The way I describe the tones is there's a guy blaring bass music in his car beside you. And the next position is a rampant dinosaur just destroying everything. Position 3 is a slightly more tamed dinosaur. Position 4 is kind of like position 1, but a little less dark and less muddy. But now that we've got some of the history out of the way, let's talk about my impressions on this bass. I've never held one of these in my hands before this one, and I instantly loved this thing as soon as I pulled it out of the case. You've got this beautiful 60s Gibson mother of pearl logo with the crown inlay. The neck width was very familiar to me as like a 70s SG, how it starts off really thin and then it gets kind of wider up here, and the neck is super rounded. I've got a bunch of different tonal opportunities to play with on the selector. You also have your volume and tone controls. But a few other interesting things here are the string mute. You just pull it like this, and then all the notes are kind of muted, kind of like a palm mute. So that's something I didn't know existed. We'll take a closer look at that in a minute. But as a guitar player that just occasionally would like to record some bass, what I found the most fascinating is this feels just like a guitar. Because I always thought this body would be larger than it is, because most basses, they're pretty bulky. But this is a short scale bass at 30.5 inches. Not like most of Fender's at 34. They did make extended range models. So if you're a guitar player just looking for a bass that feels familiar to you, these are about the same size. In fact, compared to this 1979 VSG, this guitar is actually just a hair bigger than this thing. As far as the width of the body goes, it's really only like an inch or two longer. So this really is comfortable to me. It feels just like a regular guitar. But the thing that's always kind of prevented me from buying one of these to review is I don't really understand the market of these. And that's because the prices are just all over the place. And I'm sure that's how most people feel about like Les Pauls and Les Paul Customs. But the more and more I dealt in them, the more and more I understood. But as with everything else, it comes down to specs and spec changes over the years. I'll dive a little bit more into this in my article on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. So these things had a pretty good run all the way through the 60s and pretty much all the way through the 70s, but then they were just kind of forgotten about until they were later reissued. So now that we know a little bit more about the history of the Gibson electric bass, let's go ahead and plug this one in and hear how it sounds. I asked you guys what songs you wanted to hear, and everybody was saying play something that Jack Bruce would do from Cream. Andy from Free was also well known for using one of these, as well as Bill Wyman from the Rolling Stones. So I'll see what I can dish out here. We know how this instrument sounds. Let's go ahead, throw it on the workbench, and take a detailed look at all of its parts. Now, I get this question all the time. Why do I rip these guitars apart? It's all about documenting all these individual pieces. I mean, some people are going to get this, some aren't. It's also to let these videos be helpful to people to try to see if theirs is all original and whatnot. And since this is all new territory to me, this is just like me in a candy shop. I had a great time with this bass so far. Alright, this thing right here has two special names for it. It can sometimes be referred to as the Mudbucker because of its really deep, thick sound, and it's also sometimes called the Sidewinder. Now, why is it called a Sidewinder? A normal pickup looks like this. If you remove all the tape that's around the bobbins, there's wires that just go around each of these coils. So it just follows this pattern, hundreds of times. And then they're placed facing up like this. But this pickup is different. The coils are going like this, so it's side loaded. This thing is heavy. Just the pickup itself weighs 10.5 ounces. So it looks like we have some sort of foam on the back side of this, and then that's what this looks like. And here's what your neck pickup cavity looks like. You've got some impressions in here, but this pickup just sits in here, and then the wire is routed into the control cavity like this. So this is all hidden underneath the pick guard. But notice, this is what the guitar used to look like, this nice deep red cherry color, but it's slightly faded. I mean, this one still has a good amount of cherry to it, but instead of being like super cherry, it's more like a mahogany brown color now. And speaking of the pickguard, this is what that looks like. You can see that the thumb rest, or whatever that is just drilled directly on top of that, but the screws also secure it to the pickguard. Now what's kind of interesting, by these securing this little wooden block onto the pickguard itself, you don't
actually have to have screws in the pickguard. It stays down pretty well just by itself. And to complete the assembly of the Mudbucker here, they've got like a black little pickup ring here. I mean, it's not beveled or anything, and it just goes over like that. Then you have this chrome cover that just kind of sits on top of it like that. The bridge pickup here is literally just a mini humbucker. I mean, that's what it looks like on the outside, but you just have 4 pole pieces. But I was baffled to see. Yeah, it's just that little patent number water slide decal, just like the ones you'll find in like the Les Paul Deluxe. And here's what the cavity looks like. Nothing too crazy going on there. But the pickup ring itself is kind of curved, so that's a little bit different than what I'm used to on like Les Pauls and whatnot. And for the screws, it looks like one might have been replaced because it's noticeably shorter than the other ones. So keep that in mind. It doesn't secure as tightly as the other 3. And right here, originally this would have had a large ashtray cover. So this is not a missing screw from the pickguard. It's just the missing mounting screw for that large ashtray. This little piece of black plastic, I believe it's just glued onto the top. I mean, I'm sure you could remove it if you wanted to, but that's just to make the legs even since this is kind of propped up on a pickguard right there. Our next thing to talk about is the bridge. This was kind of interesting. There's this little contraption down here, and it looks like this. At first I was like, what on earth is that? I just thought it was part of the bridge assembly, but you know, now that I've taken a second and started to think about it, I think what this is a string dampener. Because this is like a soft rubber material. But you control this by pulling on this little metal bar. And you see how it makes that rise up? It's kind of hard to do with one hand. And it's just secured by 2 little screws right onto there. So I don't even think you technically have to have it on the base. And then the bridge itself looks like this. The ball end of the string's secure right there. Then it just kind of goes over that. And that's what it looks like on the back. So there we go. It's all put back together. Nothing was harmed. But we have a beautiful mahogany body here. Love the wood grain. I love all the authentic wear. We have our witch hat knobs right here and our Veritone switch with chicken head knob. Output jack on the front. Then we move on to the rosewood fretboard. Now, being 1967, I'm not 100% sure if this is Brazilian or not. I believe that's kind of the time when it's like iffy, but it very well might be. Now, as far as the frets go, you do have some light flattening wear. Since this is a consignment piece, I want to be as thorough as possible. Using my fret rocker here, I mean, you can see there's a little bit of unevenness on some of the frets. It's not a lot, but again, full disclosure on this one, I don't want anybody to be, you know, oh, I'm surprised, I'm going to return this, because that just kind of gets messy when it's a consignment deal. So you could do a level recrown job if you wanted to, but I think the bass plays pretty well as is. I'm not 100% sure, but I think the nut might be replaced. And I say that because it looks like there's a bunch of glue buildup right here, but maybe that's just how they did it on these. With your truss rod cover removed, you can see the truss rod has got plenty of life left. The top of the threads are pretty much level with the end of that. The neck is nice and straight. No neck reset is needed, and it has never been done. And we have our beautiful Gibson crown and the Gibson Mother of Pearl logo. The truss rod cover itself, it is chipped at the bottom right here. So it's not, 100%, but it's still in good shape. It's not like cracked at the bottom or anything. Here's what the back of that looks like. So maybe they sanded that down if they replaced the nut. The EB-3 is a short scale bass at 30.5 inches. It's got a nice slim nut width at 1.5 inches, but then it's very guitar-like at the 12th. It's just a little under 2 inches right there. Neck depth at first fret, it looks like 0.88. Which then increases to 1.03 at the 12th. It's a very nice rounded neck, super comfortable. Moving on to the back of the bass, inside of our control cavity, there's been a few modifications here. So the main owner of this guitar, he said this baritone switch got loose, and a few times in his ownership, the wires got broken because it would just be spinning around all the time. So he just recently had this professionally wired back up from the last time that happened. So he said one of these wires, I think he said it was this green one, has been replaced. But as far as the pots go, these three look original. This one, I can't really see any type of markings on it. It might have been replaced. And the owner said the output jack might have been replaced. That kind of looks like the ones that I've seen in like some 70s styled SGs. So it might be something like that. But I'm not an expert when it comes to this, so take a nice good look. The only pot code that I could read was right here. It looks like it says 1960. 7. And the person who did the work on this engraved his name right here. And there's not much more to go over on the back of this besides beautiful wood grain. We have our regular style strap buttons right here. Here you can see your neck joint and the back of the neck on this one. You've got some finish wear that we'll take a closer look in here in a second. And back of the headstock, I'll go ahead and pop one of these tuners off for you. So up close, this is what one of these tuners looks like. There's no Gibson branding on them or anything, and it's just a fairly basic tuner. But notice how there's these like little gripper things right here. When I take you over to the headstock, you're going to realize they had to accommodate for those. And they did that by routing out just a very thin channel on each side of the tuners right there. That's interesting. It looks like screaming faces. But here's another area where you can see the dark cherry color versus this kind of lighter mahogany one. Serial number looks like 306186. And these tuners do utilize these fair rules right here. This particular example weighs 8 pounds, 2.3 ounces. However, as we've discovered, I would be willing to bet 75% of that weight is just from like these heavy parts. Even the tuners were pretty beefy.
Now we know just about everything about this guitar, but if you're interested in it, let's go ahead and review its condition. Overall, this bass is pretty worn, but I would say it's actually in pretty good shape for its age. You've got your typical dings around the headstock, but at least your logo's still there. It's not super scratched up or anything. Obviously, you have some finish checking and whatnot. The strings on this guy, I believe, are flat wound because I don't feel them at all, so it's super comfortable to play. The neck is nice and straight, as we saw, and the rosewood fretboard is beautifully conditioned here, and I polished up our frets. We've got some scratches and fingerprints and light nicks and dings pretty much all over this guitar. But I wouldn't say it was abused. The owner of this one said he bought it in the 80s from a pawn shop. He kind of used it throughout college and high school, but eventually he just kind of fell out of favor of playing bass and switched to guitar because playing bass, it just wasn't a lot of fun for him unless he was playing with other people. You've got some light finish checking around the output jack, but no breaks, cracks, or repairs. So it's just a well-loved bass, I would say. Back of the headstock serial number looks like 306186, as well as the edges here, but thankfully this one has not had a snapped neck. You can see it's got some nicks and dings, but nothing that you're going to have to worry about. Now the finish is worn along the edges of the neck, so if you're looking for an example that doesn't have that, this will disqualify that one from that. You've also got a few like light ring marks and whatnot. I would say right here is the worst of that, but I really didn't notice it too much while playing. As far as the back goes, you've got some finish missing right here, where it's kind of like rubbing against probably somebody's belt buckle. And you've got lots of impressions and scratches, nicks and dings on the back. The neck is good, no breaks or cracks at the heel, but you have lots of finish wear around the edges as well as more nicks and dings. Strap buttons are original though, so no worries there. It's just a pretty cool bass right here. So let's go ahead and view it under Blacklight. Under Blacklight, everything is looking great here. We'll just kind of run the light over it here again. Now in regular light, you can kind of see there was once a circular sticker right here. So it must not have been on it for very long. The discoloration between the finish is very minimal, if any at all. It's mainly just kind of that ghost mark. But everything is looking good here. Take a look at the back side of the instrument, mainly just this area of chipped finish right there. Run it along the edges. There's lots of finish wear along the edge. This will kind of help highlight that even better. You can see more right there. Now the back of the neck. You can see once again some light finish wear pretty much all over this bass. It was definitely used throughout its years, even before the owner that has it now purchased it. So lots of light finish wear. And the back of the headstock is also looking good. And the face is also looking great.
This instrument comes in a newer Gator hard shell case. I'm pretty sure this is brand new because the guy shipped it in the box for this case. But you have 4 TSA latches on this thing. Those are very nice. The only bad thing about this case is it's not the proper size for this bass. This is meant for like a full scale 34-inch bass, or maybe even larger, I'm not even sure. But you've got 2 compartments right here, including the case keys, and it does a decent job at protecting the guitar because it has a lot of drop-off room, so you don't have to worry about your headstock. So the bass itself wants to sit right here, that way the headstock is properly supported. So I'll have tons of extra bubble wrap in here, as well as some extra rags that will secure the fit. If you think you might be interested in being the next owner of this 1967 Gibson EB-3 bass, feel free to check out the link in the description that will take you to the Reverb for Sale ad. Thank you Troglodytes for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.